All right, guys, Copper Cutlass here. I know I look like an anchorman with the poinsettia and the pen, but this is not what we're doing. So I got a message today from a follower on Facebook who follows our Copper's Garage page. We're just going to call him Don. And he had some questions about what he can do to get his car to the high 13s. His car currently runs a 14.3, which personally I think that's really good for what he's got. He's got a really good base to work with. What it is the 71 Cutlass. I got notes for this one, guys. I don't want to mess it up. So it's a 71 Cutlass S. It's your typical stock style muscle car cruiser with basic mods. Your bread and butter hot rod. It's got a 350 Olds Edelbrock Performer cam. I'm going to assume the Performer intake. Turbo 350 trans, 342 gear, stock style converter. He's launching it at 1500 RPM. It won't spin past 4600 RPM. It's got a 600 CFM carb. Flowmasters, 2.5-inch exhaust, stock suspension, obviously fixed up, new bushings, springs, stuff like that. And he's got 26-inch tall tires on it. So I'm going to cut straight to the stuff that I would suggest for him to try. And these are the mods that I have chosen based off of price versus gain. I have worked my way up slowly over the last 10 years from a low 14 to running 1180s, which is still a high 11. Working for mid 11s. So here's what I would suggest to him based off of what he's got. I usually like the small hammer approach because I'm a budget guy. The small things always cost less. So what I'm off the bat, get a good torque converter. And by that I mean one that's going to work for you. What I would suggest, price and quality. Some guys are going to beat me up on this, but Jegs sells a little 1800 to 2300 stall converter. It's like $110. It's awesome. I've had it in 2 cars, and I've had guys who have ran it because I suggested it to them, and it worked out great. I think that's going to work really good for you now, but if you do step it up, that converter leaves a lot to be desired. So this is pretty much going to be specific to what you got now. If you're going to build something else down the road, yeah, buy maybe like a 10-inch 2400 stall. They are available, and then that 10-inch can get modified down the road. But a cheap upgrade, it's like $110, 2300 stall from Jegs. It's their brand. That'll really help your 60-foot times, and that reflects on the ET greatly. The other thing is you got a 2.5-inch exhaust with Flowmasters. I am not a fan of Flowmasters. Nothing about them flows great in my opinion, but they sound good, and that's what you like. I'm not going to beat you up over it, but I will suggest you run an X-Pipe. Back when I was stuck in the 14s, I did the gear change. Don asked about a gear change, about putting steeper gears in it. I went from a 342 to a 373 being the only change. We saw absolutely no gain. None at all. Just 60 foot. We didn't go anywhere else with it. And then we added an X-Pipe. And through the mufflers, we managed a 1386, like the second pass. Our first pass was a 1399, which was my best so far, tossing the belt, which is a fluke. But once I put the X-Pipe through the mufflers, I managed a 1386 at like 97 miles an hour or something like that. And so that's why I tell people, an X-Pipe really helps. You can buy a cheap Summit or Jegs brand X-Pipe for like for a 2.5-inch kit. I think it's like $85. You can, if you got a welder, it's pretty easy to set up. It's not bad at all. Or you can add some cutouts. That's even cheaper. The cutouts are like $60 for the pair. You can add it to your current exhaust, and opening up the headers is worth at least 2/10 most of the time. But keep in mind, open headers will lean out your engine, and if you're undercarbed, it might even run worse than what it is. But keep that in mind in my further suggestions, what I'm going to say. So an X-Pipe or cutouts are really good bang for the buck. Another thing, I didn't ask him if he had adjustable valve train. Oldsmobile valve train factory is non-adjustable, and it can fall anywhere between 40 thousandths and 80 thousandths of preload. More preload is not good. It make your valve train quieter, but it kills vacuum. It's harder on stuff. Um, I learned this in my last setup. We were running 1230s, and I'm really trying to get this thing into like 12 O's. So I put a 3500 stall, and I backed off the preload. I went from your typical conventional half a turn, which is 40 thousandths, and I went down to like almost nothing, like just a little, like almost an eighth of a turn. Uh, and it changed the idle quality. It idled smoother. The vacuum reading was better, and it revved. It rev. I couldn't spin that engine past 6,300. We'd made that change, and it really woke the car up. That testing, unfortunately, is a little inconclusive because um, the engine got sold, and that particular day at the track, we had zero bite. That torque converter was hitting the tire harder than the suspension that we had. So there's that first suggestion. Lift your preload. That is a simple thing you can do. Just don't back off the preload too much, because if you got the typical spring clip retainer, not the big C clips, what happens is if you leave too little preload, when the plunger bottoms out, it bangs up on the spring, and it eventually pops it out as it smashes it. So you want to at least run an eighth of a turn. I think is safe for that style of lifter, as it should leave more than enough room for error. Now, even simpler, cheaper things to do are remove the air cleaner at the track. You got a carburetor that wants to suck air in straight down, not through the sides. I think Engine Masters did this test. The taller the air cleaner they went with, the better. And I think the 5-inch was the best. If you got a 3-inch, get a flow-through lid. I had one, but we really found out this past summer what having too small of an air cleaner can do. Car was a dog, and I forgot that I was so excited, I forgot to remove the air cleaner, and I had a little crappy 2-inch tall Moroso cheapo air cleaner on there just for the street. And even on the street, it affected my idle. So if you run an air cleaner at the track, just chuck it. That might help out too. And then do a fresh air setup. For us, I got the stock style ram air, fiberglass ram air hood, stock style. We added a fresh air pan to it to seal it from the hood to the carburetor. We saw almost 2 miles an hour in gain. I think if I had the taller scoop hood, it'd probably be a little bit better, but that was it cost me nothing to do that on that hood almost. I didn't spend a lot, and I think I had like $35 in it, and boom, we saw gains. Now, other suggestions that you can keep in mind, and I might say that these are all the suggestions I already had mentioned are suggestions anyone can try out. It's pretty universal. There's a plethora of explanations on why these things will work. But these are the things that worked for me. And that's why I'm sharing them with him and with the viewers out there, because I thought it was a really good point to share this, because a lot of people ask me about these things. I get questions a couple times a week. There's people, friends, stuff like that. So other suggestions to keep in mind that are not really considered like too streetable, they work great though, is electric fans. Back when we were running high 12s, I was still running a mechanical water pump and fans, and we were running like 12 90s, and I put a Moroso water pump drive, which I had previously used. I've used them on the street for years, no issues. People say they suck. No, buy a replacement motor. If it does burn out, guess what? 2 bolts, you swap them out on the side of the road, you're back in business. Make quick canisters too if you do that. So electric water pump drive, electric fans. If you're running power steering, there's no way around that unless you go to manual steering. These are all things that create drag on the motor. They eat up horsepower. Now, 2 things that I'm going to I even wrote it on here, that I highly recommend is Add a vacuum gauge inside the car you can read on the big end of the track. That's going to tell you if you got too small of a carburetor. You might be a little undercarb because you can't spin it, but the only way to know is with a vacuum gauge. And then an air-fuel ratio gauge. An air-fuel ratio gauge I never used up until this past season, and it really made it easier for me to understand the circuitry of a carburetor because I can see where my air-fuel ratio had issues and when it was doing it based on throttle position, engine load, and I can see if I truly had a like a bog, as in like a rich bog or like a lean spot. It really helped me tune, and it might help you tune as well. Those two things you might have $200 in, but I highly recommend it. It will make you a better tuner. I don't think I could have survived this past season without at least the AFR gauge. I learned a lot using the gauge this year because I really stepped it up in the combination that we had this summer. Cut weight. Every 100 pounds you cut out of the car is a tenth. So let's say you got a regular steel hood. You want the cool ram air hood. That's, between the hood and the deck lid, that's significant. You're cutting weight there. This particular guy, Don, I saw he's got Craigers on his car. They're heavy. You might want to buy some cheap aluminum wheels at the swap meet that weigh less. Some center lines, they're plentiful. You can buy them cheap. Maybe get some cheap front tires. If you get some 15 by 3s, I got for a pair, it's like $110 of the one, I think it's 185 65 15 or 165 85 15. It's a typical VW tire. And then in the back you can get a sticky tire. Slicks help. They do help. Just because you don't feel it spin does not mean you're not spinning. And suspension work. I can go on for days about suspension work because I learned a lot with my car. But the faster you get the chassis to react, the faster the car is going to go down. It's going to improve your 60-foot time. With GMA bodies, the information is everywhere on how to make it work. And usually you don't start to really need to do some aggressive stuff until you're probably in the low 12s. The basics work up until then. Box control arms, maybe some relocation brackets that drop the lower control arms, which change your instant center. So if you draw the triangle out, it'll change that relation between, that lift point of the car. Stock springs are probably all right. You could probably use some 50-50 shocks in the back, 90-10 shocks in the front. The sway bar, remove the sway bar at the track. That really helps the front end come up faster. I know it's sometimes a pain in the ass, but those are little things that do help. And, these are all things that have worked for me. I'm not going to share with you guys what I read in a magazine. This is literally all stuff that I have done, and I hope this helps him and anybody else who has similar questions or a similar setup. This is adaptable to almost any muscle car out there, and it'll help you. It'll like every little bit helps. It adds up. The other thing too is you got to hit the track enough to see those gains, because a lot of these things you're not going to feel it. We're talking tenths here. So guys, I hope this helps Don, and I hope this helps a lot of you guys. Now the fun thing about this, and I thought about this as I was making notes, is that a lot of these things we're actually going to be testing out and more or less documenting with the Pontiac once we start hitting the track. So we're going to get it out with some of the changes that we already are going to make. We already know what it runs. With me in it, which is a 16.2 M200, so it was a solid 16.0 car, not shifting it, just in drive. So it was pretty much a 16.0 car, and we're gonna be doing a lot of the same stuff that I covered here on that car. So guys, stick around. Once the car is done with the work phase, these are things that we're gonna be going out to the track and doing, and to me that's fun. So guys, I hope this helps somebody out. I think I just mentioned that already. So share, like, subscribe. We're still doing the calendar giveaway. So if you stuck around long enough to watch this whole damn thing, All you got to do is like it, share it, or subscribe, and you're in for the drawing. See you guys.